Hey guys, welcome to BrainPorn. My name's Dev, and on this episode, I'd like to discuss mental health in hip hop and how it affected the world we live in today. And for this, I've brought on my good friend Homage, who has not only been a true inspiration to me from learning about hip hop to just learning about life and personal growth. I'm really excited about this conversation, and I hope you are too.
How are you doing?
I'm awesome. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like mental health in hip hop.
Okay. All right, man. Let's do this.
Yeah, because I think that it's definitely becoming more prevalent, as you can hear, like some of the hip hop artists that are coming out now.
All right. All right.
There might be some serious mental health issues, and I think us as people, we're just kind of running with it, and I think we have to kind of reevaluate maybe,
Huh.
and just kind of consider this as maybe not the best option for music, maybe.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's interesting that you're looking at it in that context because yeah, I mean mental health is super. I mean, it's in the headlines, especially like these last few years, eh? But unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to mention many like new coming artists. Like I don't know a lot of new in the last few years. Like I'm still stuck in the '90s. You know what I mean with my music collection?
Yeah, no, I feel you.
Yeah, man.
Well,
And
I
I
guess
live
that
in
kind of
Asia,
deads
so
one of
okay.
my questions that I had
Okay.
because I was going to ask you about if you feel like you have to have a mental health issue just to listen to some of these new rappers. So
Just like to enjoy it.
yeah,
That's interesting. Well, hey, let's talk about like let's just like just to define our terms here, like mental illness. Like let me just share my opinion because I mean, I don't know, maybe we can talk about, how we want to talk about it, but let me say this, like I think in my mind I kind of make a difference between like a mental illness and then just general mental health.
okay,
If that makes sense. Like of course I think they're like legitimate illnesses, like physiological issues that people can have and people can develop, and then on the other side, I think there's just mental health, like just being healthy, right? Which I don't think you need to be like ill if you are unhealthy, if that makes sense. Like for instance, like physically we can be unhealthy physically, but we're not
yeah.
sick. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
yeah.
See, and I always knew that you had really cool insight. But like okay, so do you think that there's like what would be like paranoia to you? Would that be sort of a mental illness or a mental health issue, or is that something that you can develop?
Huh. That's oh hey, is that in relation to like do you think some kinds of forms of like hip hop music like lends itself to paranoia?
Absolutely, and not even that. I think it's just it's sort of like in the culture of hip hop. Like if you
Huh.
listen to like some rappers like KRS-One
Okay.
or Tupac,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, where they felt as though they were being wrong and injusticed
Right. Okay.
by the government or by police or whatever. And
Okay.
to the outside, that might look like, oh, they're just paranoid. They don't. There's not actually this problem.
Very interesting. Okay, well then let me answer your question then. So I think paranoia is interesting, right? Because I think a lot of reasons why people are paranoid are legit. You know what I mean? Like I think there are reasons to be paranoid. On the other side of that, I think there is like, you can go too far, you can get too extreme and stuff. But hip hop and paranoia, I mean, well, okay, so taking it from I mean, individuals like KRS, who I regard as like highly informed, if there's any paranoia like on behalf of the listeners, then I think that's that's legit paranoia. Like if you're
Okay,
talking about issues in banking or whatever, like KRS is, he's talking about some high level stuff.
super
Whereas
intelligent.
someone,
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about Tupac then. So, like any listener, any fan of Tupac is well aware, like, wow, the guy was like, super paranoid in regards to like, his demise and like what he thought was happening and like, his quote enemies, you know what I mean? And like, I don't know, I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of whether those things of paranoia were founded or not. But
So,
I
so
think
do you think that do you think that Tupac was maybe more of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or was it an actual thing that he should have been concerned about?
I think it's both. I think it's both, like I mean now that we're our age and we're older than him, you know what I mean? Like he died when he was 25, right?
Hmm.
Now we have this like perspective that's a few years older than that, and I think like okay, so I think let's start with this. I think like his own personal history, like the context of his family and the Black Panthers, and like his personal issues with the LAPD, and I mean that is I don't think that's him creating his self-fulfilling prophecy. I think he was a victim in a lot of ways, you know. But then, do you think he had PTSD? Like, the guy was shot in the head and shot in the nuts.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It's
who
very
wouldn't have
possible, right?
PS? You know, yeah, who wouldn't be like a little like off the hinges after something like? Did he ever have time to recover from something like that? You know?
And I don't think with all the media coverage that somebody would actually have the personal time to really keep it
Right.
together, right? And
Yeah.
especially with an upbringing like that, it's just interesting, right?
Yes. Yeah. He was like ultimate famous. He was like Michael Jackson famous, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I think yeah, like and that kind of like brings me to like my next question. What kind of effect do you think that like hip hop has on the world, like geographically, and because mental health is something that differs geographically, right?
Right. Okay.
It's actually an art, so it's not like a science where you can base it and it's a broad spectrum thing. It's actually just something that differs from community to community. So
Okay.
with hip hop having such a wide range and such a diverse role in the world today, do you think that this paranoia or this guys like Eric Sermon who are jumping off of buildings and guys like Christ Bear who are like chopping off their penis, you know what I mean? Do you think that could have an effect internationally, or is that more? Do you think that's more of like a closed geographical thing? Just
Wow. Okay.
strictly North American.
Well, let me see if I understand what you mean though. So like, so you say, correct me if I'm wrong. Like if I were to mirror what you said, if I were to try to say it in my own words, like,
Okay.
are you suggesting that like, mental illness or like, effects of mental illness and paranoia, like they differ in different countries, like people or one group of people think is mentally ill in one area of the world may not be considered mentally ill in a different part of the world? Is that what you mean? Like just
Yes,
as far as
absolutely,
customs and
absolutely.
okay. Well, that's interesting. Like, I'm not sure how to respond to that in terms of paranoia. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
think everyone has a different perception. Like here, I'm in Asia. I live in Asia right now,
Yes.
and so we have a different sort of like context of what people are generally paranoid about. Like I don't know, how do people feel about like just the like Huawei, like in China, like like in Asia, like it's all about like what is the Chinese government doing? So that's our paranoia.
Okay. Okay.
Because but as far as like can one country's or one group of people in one country affect another group? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know though. I don't think so. I mean, like let's just define hip hop just for a moment, because it does sort of get confusing when you go into different countries.
Yes.
Like so okay, so build on what I think. All right, so let's just build together. So like hip hop is like a cultural movement from like in the USA, like African Americans, like late 70s, early 80s, and then like from the 90s on it spreads all over the world, right? So it's like a
Yes.
cultural movement.
Yes.
Okay. And then in that cultural movement, it's like it includes like an artistic movement, and I think when hip hop sort of gets exported to different countries, I think it's mostly the artistic elements of hip hop that sort of spreads, because
You think it's more that than say the cultural undertones? You think it's more of an artistic expression that spreads?
I think so. And I only say that because I don't think a lot of people, like for instance, here I live in Taiwan. I don't think the general people that listen to hip hop like know about African American culture.
Okay.
In its own right. Like they don't really, not a lot of friends, or they may not have a lot of friends from the U.S. A lot of African Americans.
They have very limited exposure to African
Yeah.
culture or African
Exactly. It's
culture.
exactly right. So like the hip hop that they sort of are into, it's more of an artistic thing, right? Like, they might they might imitate like, let's say like the hip hop artists in different countries might imitate like mannerisms and fashion, but I mean just they don't even speak English sometimes, right? So they, so it sort of the cultural elements of hip hop sort of get like sort of lost in between translations,
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like okay, like if we're basing it off that, do you feel like maybe mental health has like an active role in art?
Yeah, I was gonna come back to that, and I'm happy you introduced that idea, because yeah, I think so. Like I think in any genre of music, or maybe I shouldn't say every genre of music, but let's just say like on the cutting edge of art, like Van Gogh painting, Yeah. Like Mozart in classical music. I think it's the young and the super inspired and mentally imbalanced, artists that seem to like make a really deep impression. That, you know what I mean? And I think that's because I think, what is it? Jordan Peterson had a thing I heard where he was saying like it's the most creative people that sort of go against the grain. They're the most disagreeable people.
Yeah. And then what as a people brings people with mental health issues to the front line and exposes them.
Right.
And why do we look at them with some sort of like higher regard?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I think maybe, I think it's because people that are extreme are interesting. Like Tupac was an extreme guy. Like, like, wow. Like, in one interview, he's like jumping on a chair. He's like yelling. He's, you know what I mean? He's so, he has so much passion. I think artists, I think really good artists, like they interest us because they're extreme people, but on the other side, it's like, wow, sometimes it just kind of lends itself to exploitation too, eh? Like, individuals like Amy Winehouse or like Kurt Cobain, like they sort of just kind of, their own sort of eccentricities end up being like exaggerated, and then they become these like mass marketed, like, like highly consumed like generators of art.
So does that make us as a people, like the people who are consuming this, does that make us sort of like awful just for exploiting somebody with maybe potential mental health issues and social problems and anxieties and all of this stuff to kind of ease our lives, our daily lives?
Wow, that's an interesting. So it's like an ethical dilemma, huh? Like,
yeah.
If you enjoy an extreme artist, are you complicit in that? And I don't know. See, this is how I like would approach that. Like, I think everyone is, everyone's got some mental imbalances and some spiritual deficiency. Everyone's growing, so everyone's sort of, everyone can improve. And so I think our interest in these extreme, perhaps like mentally, imbalanced people is that we see ourselves in that, or we see our potential in that,
Okay, yeah. We have that ability to connect.
Yeah, like that's what's interesting. Like, like you don't want to see someone that's just over the deep end, because then it's just sort of sad. Like, but the ability to be able to access those dimensions, where some of those artists reach, but also produce something that's meaningful, I think is like, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so sorry, I've 10 million questions.
Sure, man, I said it. We got 10 million minutes.
So okay, so as far as do you feel as though maybe people with some more extreme mental health issues actually do have the ability, like say for instance like a schizophrenia or something like that, do you feel as though somebody would actually have the potential to be speaking with or seeing things that maybe not there to us but are there? So if they're not there to us but they are there to them, does that make it not?
Yeah, that's a deep question, huh? Because that's like philosophy, whatever. Like, like reality, is it consensual or is it objective?
Yeah,
you and I are having a consensual conversation, right? But if one of us started talking about pandas or something, it would be like, okay, that's not true, that's not real. And without going into like, like the postmodern like idea of like, and the cultural relativist, is anything real? I don't want to go there, because I think that's even more imbalanced and less useful. No, I think there are dimensions that people experience. I think when we dream at night, we experience things. Are those fantasies? Are those hallucinations? Is that real? I don't know. I think it's more like a question of like, is it meaningful? Like, okay, let's talk about, like, your question was like, if someone is perceiving something that we don't see, is that real?
Yeah.
It depends. Like, insects can see radio waves. We don't see radio waves. We don't see microwaves. There's all kinds of things that we can't see. Or experience. And some people tap into that. Like, some people can see that.
Absolutely.
Like going back to your DMT episode there. Like, I don't know. It's almost like amongst people that have accessed those dimensions of reality, are like, yeah, of course there are things. One of my experience of being on DMT and then sobering up is like a feeling of forgetting, where I feel like I'm sleepwalking when I'm awake. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Yeah. It's sort of like you've tapped into a higher state of consciousness, and now you're withdrawing from that, and you're just back into like a sub reality, or something less than that is fully there, right?
Yeah, man. And there's so many, and I don't think you even need DMT to get to those areas. Like, you can do like intense advanced breathing. You could do yoga. You could do meditation. You can do all kinds of stuff. Or you can have like a mineral vitamin deficiency or something, or, you know, any sort of extreme experience, like traumatic experience, you know, like near-death experiences. We live in a culture where we don't really have a profession of people, you know, that access those areas of ourselves or reality or whatever it is, and act as a translator for everyone else that doesn't. Like we don't have one profession, so we have many professions. Like, you know, that would have been the shaman, like in pre-agricultural humanity, and now it's like sort of like fragmented. Like, so the musician is sort of part of the shaman, and then a doctor is part of the shaman, and, you know, even magicians and entertainers. It's like all of it used to be one role, you know. And so when a musician, or, you know, when a hip hop artist is on the fringes of you know, of what we might call paranoia, or like, you know, hallucination, like, you know, it's that used to be more of a formal function, like a formal job. So if they're doing a service, you know.
So I'm kind of like, so I've noticed sort of like a reintroduction of more fringe artists in hip hop lately. I think we had sort of a lull with maybe some of the ones who are promoting more drug abuse and just negativity. But now I feel as though there's like like an insurgence of like artistry, of raw artistry, of people kind of reconnecting with the roots of hip hop and just kind of running with it. And I think that's super neat. It's just something maybe me personally, it just shows up on my playlist, so I'm noticing it.
Okay.
Have you noticed anything in?
Oh man, please, whatever. Like, yeah, I would love to hear more artists. Like, I'm trying to think of some artists. Like, okay, so when we're having this conversation, like we talked about Tupac, you know, I mean, I would regard KRS as a really grounded and also highly scientific dude. Like, he's a scientist, you
Absolutely.
know. He's not. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm speaking more along the lines of like Koji Radical,
okay,
or Tank and the Bangers.
What about Old Dirty Bastard?
The Old Dirty Bastard, and you know what? Like, honestly, to me, when I was growing up, like, he was one of the best artists to me, and I think it was just his form of expression and his freedom to just kind of, he was just uninhibited.
Right. And that's what a shaman, right? Like, he would start rapping and he starts like growling like a dog, and like
there's that paranoia about him.
Right.
Whereas in his interviews he would talk about how the government's watching.
Yeah.
But in modern times, and if you look back to the book 1984, and it's just all sort of like that sort of connection. So is it real, or is it falsified? Is it just paranoia? Is it hip hop?
Okay. Hey, let me offer an idea here. So there's this. Okay, have you ever heard of, you know, Terence McKenna? Like, so Terence McKenna is, for your listeners, I don't know how to describe him. He's just like a really intellectual, very scholarly, like ethno-ecologist. I don't know what he studies people.
Okay,
anyway,
okay.
Him and his brother is like a neuroscientist or something. Like, and his brother is like a legit scientist. And they talked about, you know, they did mushrooms in the 60s or 70s. And I think Terence McKenna he's the one that popularized DMT, you know.
Okay,
so,
yeah, he's an ethnobotanist.
Oh, that's right, ethnobotanist. So, like, you know, most people sort of discover DMT and ayahuasca like from Joe Rogan talking about it, right?
Yes.
It seems like it. But, you know, Joe Rogan is always referencing Terence McKenna and Dennis McKenna. Anyway, so I wanted to bring them up because they have a really interesting book that they co-authored, and it's called The Invisible Landscape. Okay. And it's, you know, it's partially readable for a layperson because it also gets very scientific, and there's like mathematical like diagrams in the book, so it kind of gets too, like, maybe it might have too much jargon. But in that book, it was they were talking about like mental illness in the context of shamanism and what we've been talking about, right? And in that book, they sort of said, like, you know, today we call, you know, some shamans, we call them like schizophrenics, right? What I gathered from that book is that there's like something around like 1 or 2% of an average human population that has this ability, an ability to be a shaman or develop their skills to access those fringes. It might be actually involuntary. People that are born with the ability to hear and see things, and they don't want to hear and see those things. But anyway, there's like, you know, there's a small percentage of any kind of population that has this this gift / curse, and it's up to like traditions, and it's up to protocols and exercise exercises and discipline to develop these skills. Otherwise, they sort of like they become a victim of these skills. And so in our society, we're like, well, okay, well that's like someone who has issues with schizophrenia that just has to be medicated because they can't go to work and they can't live. I think in an older context, you know, where tribal societies were able to sort of invite that situation, you know, they would be like.
Do you think there's a definite way to sort of make that more usable to a human being suffering with that or suffering from that? Do you think that there's a way to kind of channel it?
I mean, I believe so.
Okay.
Like, you know, however, I think the traditional approach was like like a direct teacher student, you know, whether you could do that over internet, like over watching YouTubes, I don't know, you know, I think it requires like an intimate connection, like of someone who's been there and knows about, you know, what to do in those sort of states of mind, you know. And so someone like Old Dirty Bastard, that's, you know, like wasn't, I don't know, an emblem of mental health, you know, in his later end of his life, you know, like I think he was, I think maybe that could be an example of someone that wasn't able to integrate some really heavy sort of abilities they didn't really know how to use and didn't know how to channel. Well, you know what I mean? So
channel properly.
Yeah. So I believe in, you know, I think people are born with their abilities for reasons, and you know, and so but I'm no shaman, and I don't know. I just read read about things, you know.
No, absolutely, and you know, like I know I'm not a doctor either, so I guess it's up to each individual listener to decide on their own. But
yeah, of course,
it's an interesting topic, and I think that it's something that, especially in today's day and age, like we really have to focus and talk about mental health and mental illness, right. And because it seems to me it's becoming more and more prevalent. As far as maybe even just a simple depression or, you know, anxiety goes, that there are people out there who are suffering. If you look at you know, artists like Kurt Cobain and Mac Miller and people who have lost their lives and who are suffering with these things, and I think maybe we should not be so quick to just exploit their nature, but have a deeper look at it and be more compassionate, as opposed to just hearing them as an amazing artist. Maybe they're an amazing person who's just suffering a bit too, right?
Yeah, and also, you know, and I think neither of us, just to be clear, like neither of us are like glorifying someone who has a mental illness like they're some sort of shaman. But I think like if you do have like things in common with, you know, like that kind of thing, like I think there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of like I think it can offer hope.
Yeah, maybe don't be so quick to medicate yourself, right?
Yeah, okay.
But if you do feel as though you have to be medicated, but also do some research too, right? Like you're saying, there's tons of books out there. There's tons of doctors who have dedicated their lives to reaching this stuff. So take that for granted.
Sorry, I got to cut you off because I mean, there's this dude before I forget. He's based in Vancouver, and his name is Dr. Mate. I think that's how you say it, Mate. And he's a doctor. Patients are like the Vancouver, like the downtown patients. I can't remember what you call that area. Anyway,
like
highly
Hastings
like,
or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Hastings Street. So Dr. Mate explores like using ayahuasca for healing amongst people that are like addicted to drugs and stuff. And yeah, his lectures would have a rich amount of this kind of talk here.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to listen to him a little bit more. But quick before, because I know you're a busy dude.
Okay.
Have you ever experienced people with like mental health issues? Because I know that you yourself have been in the hip hop community for decades. You know.
Okay.
You spent some time. Like, have you ever experienced any artists who possibly feel have some mental health issues?
I've experienced people that, you know, like when I'm with them, I thought we were just having a mellow conversation, but then they would be talking about, oh man, the voices, you know what I mean, and like sort of dreading, like, oh man, you know, I don't want to hear this right now, you know. And I found that very interesting because I mean, otherwise it seemed like we were just having like a normal conversation, and they're having this side conversation. I think the art's been used for, you know, for so long because they offer like ways of reconciling emotions. When I used to like rap a lot, like just freestyle a lot, there's sort of like an affinity amongst other people that want to do that, like at a house party. And so like it's kind of funny, like I'd just be like enjoying my drink, you know, talking, and then some guy would start rapping in my ear, you know what I mean? And that's normal if you're part of that, you know what I mean? But if you're not part of that, you'd be like, why is this guy doing that? And so I think I think just art gives license for people to behave and, you know, in otherwise strange ways. Yeah, I mean, I've known a lot of colorful personalities that I wouldn't know if I would say they're mentally ill, but maybe if they didn't have like the medium of that art, like if they weren't rappers, if they weren't b-boys or b-girls, then maybe they would have more issues as far as like mental health. I think art is very healthy. Just being expressive of yourself, you know, I think that's rejuvenating.
Absolutely. So do you feel as though like hip hop came at the right time for people who were sort of downtrodden and who were probably experiencing more struggle than necessary? Do you feel as though it came at the appropriate time as a good expression or as a healthy expression? Do you think that it's created a better community?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it happened like is evidence that it came at the right time, you know? Like I think the interesting part about hip hop is that it's an urban art form. And I think everyone that lives in these like artificial environments that we call cities has to deal with balance, you know? Like I don't think it's natural to be around all these people we don't know all the time, you know? Like to be surrounded by strangers all the time. I mean, like, you know, like we might think we're chill, but you know, like our bodies are like looking for danger, you know what I mean, all the time. Like I mean, it's stressful. I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the fact that you know hip hop is an urban art form, you know, and the least ideal urban environments too, you know. So I think yeah, sure, you know, I think it was a way of a way of a balance, you know, a way of addressing like living in a concrete jungle, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Um, okay, so as far as that goes, like because hip hop has had such like a major effect
Hmm.
on me personally. I'll just say on myself personally. Has it helped you through some maybe trying times where you've maybe found yourself in a situation where you're feeling depressed, or if you had just come back from DMT or something like that? Do you
Mm.
feel as though it it has helped you get through some personal trials and tribulations?
Oh, I would say so, especially when I was like a teenager, especially when I was young and sort of and that, you know, emotionally vulnerable. Like, I mean, my heroes, like I imagine, you know, yourself too, like my heroes were like KRS. You know, I
Yeah.
love like Tupac was my hero, but it's like it's people like KRS that continue, you know, to bring, you know, ideas into my life and stability. Like seeing someone like with longevity, you know, like I wouldn't imagine like what you know, like what my life would have been like without like all the hip hop artists that you know that I've had the fortune of their art, you know. And
Absolutely. And do you sort of feel like maybe because KRS, I guess, is probably one of the more grounded artists, right?
mhm, yeah, yeah.
And he's super knowledgeable, but do you feel as though maybe somebody who was listening or who took pride in a less than grounded artist, I
Okay,
guess
okay.
maybe a more current artist, do you feel as though they can develop mental health issues, or could it be more trying on them in
Yeah.
the long term?
That's a good question, you know? Like, do you think it's almost like asking like, do you think if you watch like violent movies, does it make you a violent person, or you know, or if you listen to like misogynist hip hop music, does it make you a misogynist? Like, I think like people that play violent video games, you know, I don't think it makes people violent personally. Personally, I think it might function as like it might vent some of that stuff, you know?
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, I think it depends on like how young the person is. Like, I don't have children, but I don't think I don't think I would let like, you know, let's say like the impressionable age of like before you're like 12 or 13, listen to just anything, you know, and I wouldn't let them watch any kind of movie, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't let them
Yeah.
listen to anything, you know, but I think when you get to that questioning age, you know, that puberty age, I think, you know, I think that changes things. I think people should learn how to be critical of what they're listening to and not just, you know, like we're not
That
following.
way, that way
Yeah.
you're not, yeah, listening blindly and
Yeah.
just kind of following the crowd.
Yeah. But you know, I think that's what hip hop teaches. I think that's I think that's the dopest part about it. You know, it's like hip hop is questioning, you know, it's like the Socratic method in a musical form. It's like questioning authority. You know, I think it's good. You know, you don't want to fall into you know, the authority fallacy or whatever, like just following for following's sake. You know, I
Yeah.
think it's good. I think it's good to ask questions. Like, you know, when KRS is on CNN, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
what a moment, you know?
Absolutely. It's huge, right? And I want to bring it back to Tupac a little bit too, whereas he taught me like so much about even history, just
Right.
because he would talk about Machiavelli, for instance, right?
Okay,
So
okay.
it gives you something, it brings you to a place where you kind of want to learn more, right? So you're
Right.
developing like this desire to learn more about history, and if you
Right.
don't know history, then you're just going to repeat the same mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, like hip hop has just been such a great teacher.
Yeah, I mean, there can be like hip hop can have so much content. Like I heard a statistic or like of all like the amount of vocabulary. It's like Wu Tang has like the most amount of vocabulary, you know what I mean, of like any artist. Like one song, could have like thousands of different words in one song, and they don't repeat. Like, yeah, I think just the medium of rap can carry so much content. Like I know if you're not a hip hop listener, to listen to a rap song, especially just lyrically, it could be like a pretty intense experience.
Absolutely. Like I remember listening to AC Alone, and he's spit words that I've like never heard of. So what do you do, right? Bring out the dictionary and you kind of
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
some research, right? And it's such a great form, and it creates such passion in people and a desire to grow and to just always be increasing who you are, right?
Yeah.
For me at least. And then, I listen to some of these newer artists and stuff, and I don't feel as though they should necessarily be promoted the same as some of the past artists have been
Right.
or should be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the distinction to make between like those that are hip hop artists that are like cultural inheritors carrying the tradition, and then just those that are just sort of following the artistic formula, like just rap that the artistic, just that, you know what I mean? And like so a lot of I don't actually even call all the pop artists like hip hop artists, of course, right?
No, no, and I don't think you can. I think there has to be that sort of distinguishing line, that line drawn in the sand, where it's not all hip hop and it's not all rap. And if we do sort of call it all the same and we put it all in the same basket, I think we're doing a disservice to
Right.
people, honestly, to people who have laid down their lives.
Huh?
Yeah, like literally for this rap and for this art.
Yeah. But on that end, like, even just I don't mean to dismiss anyone that, not privy like, the cultural tradition of hip hop, because it's interesting like just the medium, the artistic medium of hip hop, the way that it exports, going back to the beginning of our interview here.
Yeah.
The way that it exports to different countries, just the way that hip hop has so much content, like you can say so much in one song. It's really interesting just to see how other cultures use that, like because in Asia, for instance, or in China, like to be specific, the rap artist, when you translate what they're saying, a lot of times they're talking about like their family and how much they love their girlfriend. There's this one guy this one guy is all about like, I'm the man in my city, like my uncle likes me, my auntie, my cousins. And I was just like, what? That's such a Confucius way of doing hip hop. You know what I mean? Like you're a family member. And in America, it's all individual. You're an individualist.
Absolutely.
So it's just different. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's so incredible because then it kind of like it breaks down that whole thing that I was thinking that maybe there's some transference of mental health stuff, but no, it's actually deeper than that, and it's more like you were saying, like artistry is the primary thing that's being taken from this.
Right. Like do you know that movie Planet B-Boy? It's like it's interesting, right? Like so it's just all about like the way that hip hop sort of transfers to other cultures. Like the Korean B-boys are very like one way, and then the Brazilian B-boys are this way, and just you see the cultural differences, but it's all the same art. It's all the same, breakdance. It's all the same hip hop stuff.
So is hip hop something in your opinion that can bring people together?
I mean, it does totally, right? Like it started as an urban inner city African American art form, and now literally, I mean, yeah, man, like I go to hip hop things here in Taipei. Foreigners are there, but a lot of Taiwanese people are rapping. Yeah, man. I mean, even when I was living in Calgary, like talk about a multicultural community night. You got all the Filipinos breaking, you got all the, you got everyone.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
and
diversity.
That's what I love about Canada in itself, is just that diversity.
Yeah, man. So it does bring together. It does bring people together in a way that, I think we can give more credit to hip hop than many other genres, because it's so inclusive as far as different, at these hip hop nights that I go to sometimes here in Taipei, it's just, it's like other events that I've been to. There's some people that are breaking, some like breakdancing, some people are rapping, some people are spraying graffiti, some people are taking turns like on a turntable. So it's not just one thing. It's not, it's not necessarily going to a show where you just watch people play guitar all night and you just drink. It's got different ways to interact.
Absolutely. So conversation, I think the conclusion that I'm coming to sort of is that hip hop is more than just rap, and it's more than just that. And as far as mental health in hip hop goes, it goes beyond that, and it's sort of an artist thing to have these hang-ups and this depression and these anxieties and it's just another way for people to just express them in a totally non-threatening,
inclusive,
self-loving way. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because we talked like earlier, we were talking about like mental health in the context of like being a shaman, and that's like an individual spiritual path, and that's one way to deal with like a mental mental problem. But I think the easiest way is just to be part of a community, right?
Absolutely.
So find your local hip hop night and meet some other b-boys, start like write a rap. You know what I mean? I think that, that being part of a community makes people happier and healthier.
Absolutely. Like hip hop is one of the things that made me, well, it is like the thing that made me start just keeping a notebook.
Wow. Yeah.
And just for all the ups and for all the downs and for all the planning and for all the dreams and everything that a person writes in their journal. Hip hop was that kind of defining moment where it was, hey, like I need one of these. Like if I want to have like any sort of bearing in the hip hop community, right?
Right. Yeah. It makes you cool. It makes you cool to be smart when you're a teenager to learn stuff and to express stuff. So God bless that, eh? Like we're very lucky to have that, like, that influence in our life.
Absolutely. I feel sad for people who grow up in communities where maybe they're more censored and they're not able to listen to hip hop, or they don't have these same sort of places to vent,
right,
and to be true artists and to truly express themselves.
Right.
And I'm super glad that I got to grow up in a place like Canada, and I'm super glad that it was in a time where we have so much ability to expand. We have the internet and we have awesome postal services and international like shipping and everything like that. So I think it's just super cool. And yeah, I'm really happy. I'm glad that we had this conversation. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, awesome, bro. Like, I mean, on a personal note, like you were the person that introduced a lot of the hip hop artists that stuck with me. So for your listeners, Dev and I have been friends since we were like 12 or 13 or something.
Yeah, we're
right. And that
man.
was when and at that time I was listening to hip hop, but I went to a school that no one else knew about hip hop except for basically nobody. Like I was listening to like other stuff. Like, I mean, my mom had De La Soul taped off, so I had De La Soul, and in Canada we have Maestro Fresh West and who else? But then through your friendship, you introduced me actually to a lot of people like Wu-Tang and stuff like that. So
I remember some of our earliest days, man. We were listening to Goody Mob, right?
Yeah, man.
And you were sort of like a teacher to me. You're such an inspiration to me, man. I really do appreciate you. But you taught me so much, like even just breaking down what Goody Mob meant. You know what I mean? And that's good die mostly over bullshit.
Yeah, man.
And it's just something like these little things that stick with you and super cool, right? Like and the Fugees and KRS-One and yeah, man, the list goes on, right?
Yeah, we grew up in a very fortunate time of hip hop's historical timeline too, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was that at that point where it became not just an art form and it became that mainstream. It was the art.
Yeah, I mean when we were getting into it, like your brother also turned us onto a lot of stuff. It was like Rap City. It was like a 30-minute show on TV once a week, and that was where we got all of our info. Like what was it? The Source magazine. It was like this paper thin little magazine, but that was all there was.
Yeah, and we had Master T, right? And he had his keyboard and everything like that. Yeah, man, it was definitely a cool time and lots of great memories. That's for sure.
Yeah, so please keep me posted on. We're talking about 90s hip hop, but I'm still like wanting to figure out some new people here. Like,
yeah, man, I'll definitely. Well, I'll hit you up and I'll drop some beats whenever I come across them. Right.
Cheers, bro. Cheers.
All right, bro. Nice talking to you.
Oh, pleasure, Dev. Pleasure.
All right, peace, dog.
All right, man. Peace.
Fuck, it's great talking to that guy. Anyways, that was another episode of BrainPorn. Thank you guys for listening, and special shout out to my dear friend Homage. You guys can reach us at brainpornpodcast@gmail.com, on our Instagram at brainporn, and that's BRAINP9RN, and also on our WordPress at brainpornpodcast.wordpress.com. Thank you guys for listening, and hope you enjoyed. Peace.